Hello students, welcome to Byju's classes. We sincerely apologize for the delay. There was a small technical issue which had to be resolved. If the voice is audible, can you just drop a message so that we can proceed with the session? Okay. So in this session, we will be dealing with the current affairs of the last 1 week, that is from 8th of March to 14th March. We will cover the topics which are relevant for both prelims and mains. But since prelims is just 90 days away, I'll try to make the session more prelims oriented. The first topic for the day is Commonwealth card. The Commonwealth card refers to a business travel card scheme that has been proposed by the Commonwealth Group of Nations. It is very similar to the already existing business travel card scheme of the APEC grouping. The primary purpose of the Commonwealth card or the business travel card is to allow entrepreneurs and skilled professionals greater freedom to work in the member states, to allow greater freedom of movement amongst the member states. This freedom of movement will help in promoting trade and investment within the group. This is the most significant objective of the Commonwealth Business Travel Card. It basically entails simplification of the existing visa regime. So once the visa process is simplified, it becomes much easier for entrepreneurs and skilled professionals to travel seamlessly within the region, and this will serve as a major boost in promoting trade and investment within the grouping. Simplification of visa process is one of the measures under ease of doing business. Once the visa process is simplified, it will significantly boost the ease of doing business in each member state. So via the business travel card, the Commonwealth Group is hoping to unlock the true potential of the Commonwealth Group. Till now, Commonwealth has been largely redundant at the global level. Even though Commonwealth as a group has lost its geopolitical significance, it still has a lot of significant role to play within its own ambit. Due to the interlinkages that these member countries share with regard to their common history, common language, common culture, and the shared values of democracy, there is a lot of potential for tapping into the trade and investment arena amongst the member states. So the business travel card scheme, if implemented, will play a very important role in improving the ease of doing business factor within the member states, and it will generate greater economic activity within the member group. Now let's try and look at what sort of questions might appear from the Commonwealth topic, because since Commonwealth card has been proposed last week, the question will not be limited to this particular topic. Commonwealth as a whole group will become significant for your exams from both prelims as well as mains perspective. So we'll try to analyze the salient features of Commonwealth Group. The Commonwealth Group was established formally via the London Declaration. The London Declaration was signed in 1949. The primary purpose of the grouping was to bring together all former colonial territories under the ambit of one group called as Commonwealth Group. Technically speaking, the Commonwealth Group is headed by the monarch of Britain, and there are 52 member states which form a part of the Commonwealth Group. Some of the significant members are India, you have Pakistan, Bangladesh. It also includes Australia, you have New Zealand, Canada, and also former colonial territories in Africa, such as South Africa, Namibia, Nigeria, etc. These are some of the prominent countries which are a part of the Commonwealth Group. It also includes the island territories in the Caribbean region as well as in the Pacific region. And of course, Britain itself is a part of the Commonwealth Group. And for protocol purposes, the group is represented or headed by the monarch of Britain, that is the Queen of Britain. But the real power is vested with the Commonwealth Heads of Government Meeting Group, or the CHOGM group. The Commonwealth Heads of Government Meeting is held regularly at an interval of 2 years. That's the usual schedule of the Commonwealth Heads of Government Meeting. And this particular meeting holds certain significance from the Indian foreign policy perspective. So we'll try to analyze the last couple meets from 2013 and 2015, and we'll try to see how it was important from an Indian perspective. In 2013, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting was held in Colombo, and this particular meet turned out to be very controversial. The primary reason why this meeting became controversial was the violation of human rights in Sri Lanka. The member states of Commonwealth, such as Canada, Mauritius, they raised the issue of ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka and the gross human rights violations that were committed by the Sri Lankan forces during the last phase of the civil war. So this created a lot of controversy surrounding the summit. Even in India, the state of Tamil Nadu passed a resolution which demanded that the Indian government abstain from the meet. Due to a lot of political pressure and owing to coalition politics, the Indian Prime Minister had to skip the meet. This was a significant development in India's neighborhood because India has consistently been an active part of the Commonwealth meet, and India is the largest member in the group. So the absence of the Indian Prime Minister sent out a clear message to Sri Lanka that violation of human rights was not tolerable, and any violation of human rights was considered to be in violation of the Commonwealth Charter. This also created a lot of hostility between the Indian and the Sri Lankan government. Back in 2013, Sri Lanka was headed by Mahinda Rajapaksa, and Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa was perceived to be strategically more aligned with the Chinese government. So the China card was being played by the Sri Lankan government, and India's boycott of the Commonwealth Summit in 2013 gave more impetus to Mahinda Rajapaksa to align Sri Lanka strategically more with Chinese interests. So as a result, the 2013 Colombo Summit had its share of significance, and India was represented by the External Affairs Minister, and for the first time in many decades, the Indian Prime Minister had to boycott the summit. In 2015, the summit was to be held in Malta, another member state of the Commonwealth Group. Even during this summit, Prime Minister Modi did not attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. The primary reason why India had to skip this meet at the head of state level was twofold. One, Indian foreign policy had undergone a slight shift in its thinking, where India perceived the Commonwealth Group to be not of much relevance in the international arena, and also ahead of the Paris summit, the climate change summit that was to be held in Paris, there was a lot of pressure being brought upon India by the Commonwealth member states to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. The Commonwealth Head of Government meeting usually discusses or deliberates upon burning issues of the day, such as climate change, terrorism, human rights, etc. So naturally, the Commonwealth meeting brought up climate change as one of the very important topics of discussion during the 2015 summit, just ahead of the Paris Climate Summit. And the member states such as Canada, Australia and others, they brought a lot of pressure on India to bring drastic cuts in its emissions. As a result of this, the Indian Prime Minister decided to skip the summit, and again, India was represented by the External Affairs Minister, and for two consecutive meets, India was not represented at the head of state level. So this goes on to show the declining significance of the Commonwealth Group in India's foreign policy calculus. That being said, it's not fair to say that the Commonwealth as a group is not at all relevant for India's foreign policy. For example, in 2018, the CHOGM summit is scheduled to be held in the United Kingdom. And recently, just a couple of weeks back, Theresa May, who is the current Prime Minister of Britain, has personally encouraged Prime Minister Modi to be a part of the 2018 summit, which is scheduled to be held in United Kingdom. The reason why this becomes important is because in the context of Brexit, since UK has decided to quit the European Union and it is actively looking out for trade and investment partners across the globe, UK wants India to play an active role in the Commonwealth group. So as UK looks to diversify its trade and economic engagements with other countries across the globe, it feels that India can play a very significant role as a trade partner, as an economic partner. So due to this, the 2018 summit that is scheduled to be held in UK holds significance for India's foreign policy. The other aspect about Commonwealth is that there is a committee which is abbreviated as the CMAG. It stands for Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. A very significant committee under the Commonwealth after the Commonwealth Heads of State Government Meeting Group. The CMAG Group is mandated to uphold the Harare Declaration. The Harare Declaration under the Commonwealth Charter dictates that the member states of Commonwealth are obliged to uphold fundamental political values. This is the primary mandate of the CMAG Group. The Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group is mandated to uphold the Harare Declaration, which dictates that the member states are obliged to uphold the fundamental political values of a democracy. What do you mean by fundamental political values? It could be rule of law, establishment of rule of law, following constitutional process or due process of law, ensuring judicial independence, and respecting human rights or upholding human rights, etc. So these principles can fall under the ambit of fundamental political values as per the Harare Declaration, and the CMAG Group will look into the implementation of these fundamental values in all the member states. And if any member state is found to be deviating from these fundamental political values as enshrined in the Harare Declaration, then the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group is empowered to take punitive action against such member states which are found to be disobeying these fundamental political values. The punitive action could include setting up an investigative team to visit the member state to carry out investigations and inquire about breakdown in the constitutional machinery in the member state. And second, it could even disband the member state from the Commonwealth Group. So any of these two punitive actions will be seen in the international arena as a major embarrassment to the member state, and it could also lead to further isolation in the international arena. For example, a few years back in Fiji, there was a constitutional crisis, a constitutional coup was staged, and immediately the CMAG Group took note of this development. They discussed the incident, and since the constitution machinery was broken down and people in powerful positions in Fiji were found to be responsible, the CME Group decided to disband Fiji as a member of the Commonwealth Group. Similarly, in 2007, when there was a military coup in Pakistan, the CME Group instructed the Pakistani dictatorship to immediately restore constitutional machineries. And if not, the consequences were very clear that Pakistan would be disbanded from the Commonwealth Group. Also recently, in Maldives, there has been a constitutional crisis that has been brewing from the last 3 to 4 years. And this crisis holds significance from an Indian perspective and as well as from the examination perspective with regard to the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. When the government of Mohammad Nasheed was overthrown and there were allegations of a coup being staged in Maldives, since then there has been an internal struggle for power in Maldives. Also, judicial independence in Maldives has been compromised. And there have been various reports across the world which clearly states that the fundamental political values in Maldives has undergone drastic changes. So in 2015, the CME Group was mandated to look into the constitutional crisis in Maldives. During this process, the chances were very high that punitive action could be taken against Maldivian government. So India, being the largest member of the Commonwealth Group, was requested by the Maldivian government to lend assistance in the deliberations that were happening at the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. So it presented a unique challenge for India in the neighborhood, because on the one hand, India has to be seen to be playing a very positive role in its neighborhood to help its smaller neighbors, especially in the Indian Ocean region, because India considers the Indian Ocean region to be falling under its ambit of primary sphere of influence. And also India considers any interference by external powers in the internal affairs of a country to be invalid or to be going against international law. Because India in itself has been at the receiving end of such external pressure being brought in by multilateral groups with regard to, it could be with regard to the Kashmir crisis or with regard to the Northeast militancy. So India firmly believes that any internal dispute is a matter of internal affairs of that particular country, and India believes in the policy of sovereignty. So in this regard, India is bound to assist Maldives in putting off any punitive actions that might have been taken by the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. On the other hand, if India supported Maldives in this case, it could have been criticized by the Western world for suppressing human rights, because India, being the world's largest democracy, is expected to uphold the fundamental values of a democracy and ensuring that human rights is not violated, and also ensuring that constitutional machinery is functioning with due process is a major responsibility for a country like India. At the same time, India was also wary of China playing a disruptive role in this issue, because if India voted against Maldives, and if India decided to side with the Western countries in order to uphold human rights, then Maldives would have clearly played the China card, just the way Sri Lanka has done in the past. If you take up the issue of United Nations Human Rights Council, which took upon the allegations of human rights violations in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka was being deliberated upon at the UNHRC, India had to vote against this resolution, despite logical thinking which suggested that India had to support Sri Lanka in the region if India had to keep China away, and if India had to maintain its strategic dominance in the IOR region. But due to coalition politics, due to intense pressure from the Tamil Nadu parties, the regional parties, India had to vote for the resolution, and Sri Lanka was extremely disappointed with the stance that the Indian government had taken. So India clearly saw that Sri Lanka drifted towards China as a result of India's vote at the UNHRC. So with regard to Maldives, India did not want to commit the same mistake. So India actively supported Maldives at the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, and the Indian assistance helped Maldives to sail through the investigative teams of Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. And this made the Maldivian government, which was headed by Mr. Yamin, very happy. And Mr. Yamin appreciated the assistance provided by the Indian government. And as a reciprocal measure, he paid an immediate visit to New Delhi to thank the Indian leadership for assisting the case of Maldives at the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group. This also further led to closer ties between India and Maldives. Despite all the controversies in India-Maldives relationship over the last 4 years, the decision taken by India to help Maldives at the CME helped bring Maldives closer to the Indian strategic fold. So these issues with regard to Commonwealth can become very important from both prelims and as well as a mains perspective. There have been frequent questions, especially on multilateral groups, and Commonwealth does hold significance even to this day as far as India's foreign policy calculations are concerned. The second topic for the day deals with an international NGO known as Transparency International. This particular NGO has been in news in the last 1 week, and UPSC has a tendency to focus on international bodies or international groups, non-state groups such as Transparency International or Amnesty International and various other groups which play a significant role in ensuring good governance is established across the world. So any issues related to such NGOs could be relatively important, especially from a prelims perspective. The reason Transparency International is in news is because recently Transparency International has conducted a survey on corruption and bribery in the Asia Pacific region. The primary mandate of Transparency International is to combat corruption and bribery across the world by carrying out opinion polls and by generating expert opinions on systematic corruption that happens across the globe. So in this particular survey, Transparency International has focused on the Asia Pacific region, and 16 countries have been surveyed in the Asia Pacific region. And unfortunately, India ranks the highest with regard to bribery rate in the Asia Pacific region. The organization has estimated that around 69% of the people surveyed believe that the Indian system is highly corrupt. 69% of the respondents believe that the rent-seeking system is deeply ingrained in Indian bureaucracy. This is an infamous position to hold for India. This clearly goes on to show the need for urgent administrative reforms in the country. So Transparency International has come out with these figures. Countries like Japan, South Korea are placed really well in the Asia Pacific region, which clearly indicates that they have a very transparent system of governance, that these countries have managed to establish good governance systems in their respective countries. So India has a lot to learn from these countries, and India has a lot to catch up on with regard to reducing corruption, reducing bribery in our administrative setup. Now let's look at a few basic facts and figures with regard to Transparency International, because these might be important from a prelims perspective. Like I said earlier, it is an international NGO which is based out of Berlin, Germany. It is headquartered in Berlin, Germany. It was set up in 1993 with a primary mandate to combat corruption and prevent criminal activities. Kindly note down the primary objectives of such groupings. For example, Amnesty International, the primary objective is to uphold human rights. Whereas for Transparency International, the primary objective is to combat corruption and prevent criminal activities. So this can be designed as a prelims question, and the options might easily confuse you unless you are very sure about the exact mandate of such organizations. Also, UPSC tends to focus on the reports published by such organizations. There have been plenty of questions in the last few years which refer to some of the reports published by such international organizations, and you're asked to select as to which agency or which organization comes up with these reports. So let us try and see as to what publications does the Transparency International come up with. Transparency International, it publishes primarily 2 reports. The first one is known as the Global Corruption Barometer, and the second one is known as the Corruption Perceptions Index. These 2 publications or reports that are published by Transparency International are very important. Kindly make a note of it. Both these reports carry out global surveys. It interacts with common people, tries to get their opinion about the functioning of their respective systems. It also brings in expert opinions to analyze the level of corruption and the level of criminal activities in each country. Based on these surveys, it prepares a global index known as the Corruption Perceptions Index. Based on this index, countries are ranked in accordance to the level of corruption in their countries. So according to the 2016 Corruption Perceptions Index report, India was ranked at a dismal 79th position. In fact, India shares the 79th position with China as well. But this is not something to be proud of. If you look at Scandinavian countries like Sweden or Norway, these are the countries which are at the top of this index, which have managed to establish good governance systems, largely corruption-free systems. So India has a lot to catch up on with regard to this. So India currently holds 79th position on the Corruption Perceptions Index, which is published by Transparency International. So these facts and figures will be relevant from your prelims perspective. Let's move on to the third topic for the day. The third topic deals with surrogacy. The draft surrogacy bill, which was brought out by the central government in November, is currently under scrutiny by the Parliamentary Standing Committee. The Parliamentary Standing Committee is looking into the various features of the draft surrogacy regulation bill. The surrogacy bill has been brought out with a progressive intent. So let us look at some of the features of the bill, and also let us try to analyze the significance of this bill, the various features of this bill. Because any such legislative action is very important from both a prelims and as well as a mains perspective. An entire mains question can be dedicated to such important pieces of legislation. The reason surrogacy bill is in news in March is because the Supreme Court has opened a new window for single women or men to also opt for the surrogacy route to have kids. The draft surrogacy regulation bill, which was tabled in November, provides for, or it allows only infertile, legally married Indian couples to opt for surrogacy. So according to the draft legislation, single women or men who are not married cannot opt for surrogacy. They cannot have kids. So in order to provide relief to men and women who are single, who are not married, but still who want to have kids of their own genetic lineage, have been given an option or have been given a window by the Supreme Court to present their representation to the Parliamentary Standing Committee, to include their demand to allow single men and women also to adopt the surrogacy route to have children. So this is a very significant development, since the surrogacy bill is yet to be passed. And let us try to look at some of the features of this bill, because these features can figure either in your prelims question, or you might be asked to develop an analysis in your mains as well. So some of the features of the draft surrogacy regulation bill are: it was introduced in the parliament in November 2016. It was one of the significant pieces of legislation brought about by the Modi government. The first feature of this bill is that it defines the term surrogacy. It clearly defines and outlines what surrogacy means. Surrogacy basically refers to the process of utilizing the womb of a surrogate mother in order to implant a fertilized egg which has been drawn from the egg and sperm of an infertile couple, to enable that infertile couple to have children. The infertile couple which commissions surrogacy are known as commissioning parents, and the women who accept or agree to implant the fertilized egg of the commissioning parents to deliver a surrogate baby is known as the surrogate mother. So this draft bill clearly defines the terms surrogacy, commissioning parents, and surrogate mother. The primary objective of this bill is to safeguard the interests of surrogate mother and as well as the child which will be born out of surrogacy. In order to protect the interests of these two groups, the progressive legislation has been brought about. We'll try to analyze the pros and cons of the bill. The primary intent of the bill is to prohibit commercial surrogacy. What do you mean by commercial surrogacy? When surrogacy is carried out by surrogate mothers with the prime intent of earning money as a means of making a livelihood, in such cases, the surrogacy process can be termed as commercial surrogacy. The rampant industry of commercial surrogacy in India had given rise to a lot of exploitation with regard to the surrogate mothers, and also it created a lot of ethical issues with regard to the child. In fact, in 2009, the Supreme Court had observed that India had turned into a fertility tourism nation due to our poor development indicators, due to lack of good livelihood options for the vulnerable sections. Many Indian women from below the poverty line, they would opt for the surrogacy route to become a surrogate mother for commissioning parents in return for monetary gains. So this process where babies were treated as commodities raised a lot of ethical questions on moral grounds, and also it presented unique challenges with regard to law. The surrogacy industry in India was largely unregulated. There were many middlemen who were facilitating exploitative commercial surrogacy in the name of helping commissioning parents or infertile couples to have children, and even to the detriment of mothers who could not or who are not capable of taking care of their basic nutrition were being forced into this industry where the surrogate mother and the child were being treated merely as commodities. So the draft bill focuses on prohibiting commercial surrogacy, and it allows only altruistic surrogacy. It provides for altruistic surrogacy. This is the only form of surrogacy that is supported by the bill. The term altruistic means selfless. When the process of surrogacy is carried out without any monetary compensation, except for the medical expenses and insurance, in that case, the surrogacy is termed as altruistic. If there is no monetary compensation, that is being paid from the commissioning parents to the surrogate mother, and it does provide for the medical expenses and insurance cover for the surrogate mother, which can be taken care of by the commissioning parents. So apart from the medical expenses and insurance, if there are any monetary compensation which is provided to the surrogate mother, in that case it becomes commercial surrogacy, which is prohibited under the bill. And if there is no monetary compensation, it is known as altruistic surrogacy, which is the only form of surrogacy that is permitted under the draft bill. The bill imposes certain conditions to allow altruistic surrogacy. So let's try to look at some of the basic conditions. The first condition laid out in the draft bill is that the commissioning parents have to be Indian citizens. The reason that they have to be Indian parents is because there have been plenty of complications when foreign couples were treating India as the fertility industry, where foreign couples who were childless could come into India. They could hire surrogates for a very cheap price, because most of the surrogate mothers were coming from economically deprived background, and the commissioning couples from foreign countries would come with the intention of capitalizing on the cheap surrogate industry in India. This created a lot of ethical issues as well as legal issues. It could be with regard to citizenship for the surrogate child, or it could be with regard to abandonment of kids post-delivery, or also with regard to exploitation of surrogate mothers. So the Indian government and Supreme Court took note of these various cases, which became a matter of hot debate. We will look at some of the cases as well. And as a result, it came to the conclusion that surrogacy should be limited only to Indian nationals. Even amongst Indian nationals, there are a couple of conditions. One, the commissioning couple has to be proven that they are infertile, that they are not medically capable of having children, and they should be legally married. So these are the two conditions for commissioning parents to be granted approval to adopt the surrogacy route. The second condition is, which we already discussed, it has to be only for altruistic purposes, selfless purposes, and commercial surrogacy is prohibited. So no monetary compensation can be given by the commissioning parents to the surrogate mother. The third condition, which is outlined in the draft surrogacy regulation bill, is that surrogacy should not be for the intention of producing children for trafficking purposes. Trafficking could include sale, it could include prostitution, or any other forms of exploitation. There are many instances where surrogate kids have been sold as commodity to the trafficking mafia, where children are sold and girl childs are pushed into prostitution. So the draft bill prohibits such exploitation. And the fourth condition, according to the draft bill, is that the commissioning couple has to be married for a minimum of 5 years. And there should be no surviving children. It means that a couple which is already married for 5 years and they are legally married and they are Indian citizens, but they have already one existing kid, and later on they figure out that they are infertile and they are incapable of having further children. In that case, the couple cannot adopt the surrogacy route because they already have one healthy surviving kid. Surrogacy is allowed only when the existing kid is suffering from either mental or physical illness which is deemed to be severe. If the medical board authorizes that the surviving kid is medically or physically terminally ill, in that case the married couple can opt for the surrogacy route, or else the condition remains that they should have no surviving children. It also outlines the age limit for the wife and as well as the man, that is the commissioning couple. For the female, the age limit is between 23 to 50 years, and for the husband, the age limit is between 26 to 55 years. These conditions have been put in order to take care of the future prospects of the surrogate kid. Because if a very old couple opts for the surrogacy route, the chances are very high that the surrogate kid which is born out of surrogacy can be orphaned pretty soon, or even the couple, an old couple, might lack the financial and economic resources to take care of the needs of a kid. So with regard to this, by keeping in mind the future prospects with regard to care and nourishment, the age limit has been clearly specified. And the fifth condition, a very important condition, which refers to the surrogate mother, the eligibility of the surrogate mother. The draft bill specifies that the surrogate mother has to be a close relative of the commissioning couple. If the surrogate mother is unrelated to the commissioning couple, then surrogacy will not be permitted. The condition is that the surrogate mother has to be a proven close relative of the commissioning couple. And the surrogate mother should be in the age group of 25 to 35 years. This clearly ensures that there is no threat to the life of the surrogate mother or to the kid. This will ensure that a healthy mother will be able to nourish the child during pregnancy, and also post-delivery she will be able to nurture and take care of the nutritional needs of the kid. And also, a woman can become a surrogate mother only once in her entire lifetime. There have been cases reported earlier where women would go for multiple surrogacies only with the monetary aspect in mind. They would go for multiple surrogacies, especially for foreign couples, in lieu of the financial support that the surrogate mother used to get. So this would take a huge toll on the mother's health. Already the mother is from an economically deprived background. She will not be able to take care of her nutritional needs, her emotional, psychological needs, her physical and nutritional requirements. And upon that, if the surrogate mother undergoes multiple surrogacies or multiple childbirths, it could have a significant impact on the maternal health as well as on the infant's health. That's the reason the draft bill clearly specifies that a woman can become a surrogate mother only once in her entire lifetime. And also, the medical board has to authorize or has to certify that the surrogate mother is both medically and psychologically fit. The reason is, again, medically she should be capable of nurturing herself and as well as the kid. There should be no complications during pregnancy and during delivery. And psychological stability is also looked at, because a mother tends to become very attached to the kid post delivery. The bond that a mother and a kid share is very sacred, and when a mother is having a kid for monetary purposes or for surrogacy purposes, and the child will be taken away after a few months post delivery by the commissioning couple, this will deal a major psychological blow to the surrogate mother. So unless the surrogate mother is in a psychologically stable condition, she will not be fit to undergo the process of surrogacy. Because for a kid to be snatched away from a mother, irrespective of the agreement prior to the process, will deal a major psychological blow to the mother. So to ensure the psychological eligibility, the draft bill clearly specifies that the surrogate mother has to be certified that she is psychologically fit to undergo the grueling process of motherhood. The other significant feature of the bill is that it mandates the central government and the state government to appoint appropriate authorities to regulate the surrogacy industry. Because till now, the surrogacy industry, or the most of the clinics which engage in the process of surrogacy, are largely unregulated. There's a lot of exploitation, there's a lot of illegal activities that happen under the garb of surrogacy. So to regulate the entire process of surrogacy, the central and the state governments have been mandated by the draft bill to appoint appropriate authorities to inspect, to issue licenses, and set standards for the surrogacy industry. So this will help streamline the way the surrogacy industry operates, and it will enable greater transparency in the surrogacy industry. The other significant feature of the draft bill is that it recommends the setting up of a national surrogacy board, and as well as a state surrogacy board. The mandate of these two boards is to advise the government on policy matters with regard to surrogacy, and also to lay down code of conduct for the surrogacy industry. So these two are the primary functions of the National Surrogacy Board and the State Surrogacy Board. So these features are clearly outlined in the draft bill. And also, the draft bill specifies penalties or punitive action in case of violation of any of the conditions that are laid out in the surrogacy bill. It is a very stringent bill in order to prevent the exploitation of the surrogate mother or the child. So the penalties are pretty severe. It entails a minimum of 10 years of imprisonment and also a minimum of 10 lakhs as fine. A minimum of 10 lakh rupees can be imposed as a fine, along with a minimum of 10 years of imprisonment in case of any gross violations of the Surrogacy Regulation Act. Now that we have gone through and analyzed the various features, salient features of the draft bill, let us try to analyze the ethical issues surrounding surrogacy. Because there are a lot of ethical and moral dilemmas that are presented due to the rampant practice of surrogacy for commercial purposes. And it's very important from an examination perspective, especially from a prelims perspective, to understand the ethical issues surrounding surrogacy. It can be important in both GS paper 2 from a polity perspective and as well as in GS 4 from an ethical perspective. The primary concern or the primary ethical concern about surrogacy is that it will give rise to a fertility tourism mindset, because India was considered as a fertility tourist destination. The Supreme Court itself made a comment with regard to this when there were many disturbing cases which were propping up across the country. The second ethical concern is that a baby and the surrogate mother are treated as mere commodities in case of commercial surrogacy. So this will lead to the exploitation of both the kid and as well as the surrogate mother, and the consequences could be severe, and the consequences are also of multiple magnitudes. It will affect the health of both the mother and the infant. It will affect the future growth and development of both the mother and the kid. So commercial surrogacy brings down the value of a surrogate mother and the kid to that of a commodity which can be traded for money. So this fertility industry or the commodification of the surrogacy industry gives rise to gross exploitation of vulnerable women who are desperate for a good livelihood. It will also lead to exploitation of surrogate kids. They could be either trafficked, they could be abandoned, there could be lack of attention given by the commissioning couple because they are not the biological, even though they are the biological parents, they are not obliged to take care of the needs of the kid. And the fourth ethical concern is with regard to abandonment of kids. There have been plenty of cases where children born through the surrogacy process have been abandoned by the commissioning parents. And this is more so when the commissioning couple is from a foreign country. And also the fifth ethical concern with regard to surrogacy is the citizenship issues. This also presents a legal challenge because in some countries, even in the Western world, surrogacy is prohibited. For example, countries like Germany, it does not recognize surrogacy. So, if a German couple, which is infertile, they come to India, they adopt the services of Indian surrogate mother, and if they have a kid, post-delivery, when they take back the kid to Germany, the German government will not grant citizenship to a kid born through the process of surrogacy, because German law does not recognize surrogacy. So in that case, the kid faces issues with regard to its citizenship. In fact, there was a very popular case wherein a German couple adopted the process of surrogacy in the state of Gujarat, and once the kid was born and the commissioning couple or the biological couple, the parents, they took the kid back to Germany, but the German government did not recognize the citizenship of the baby or the identity of the baby. So this presented a very unique challenge to both the German government and as well as the Indian government, because according to the citizenship rules in India, the kid will not be entitled to citizenship status because both the parents are of German nationality. So the couple finally plead in front of the Supreme Court of India, and the Supreme Court intervened, and in the interest of the kid, it came up with a very innovative solution wherein the same kid was adopted by the German couple. Via the adoption process, the Indian government was able to grant Indian citizenship to this kid. Thanks to the intervention of the Supreme Court, the couple could adopt the kid via the adoption process by following due process in India with regard to adoption, and finally it was granted Indian citizenship. Similarly, there was one more very popular, heart-wrenching case in 2008, which was popularly known as the Baby Manji case. In this case, a Japanese couple which had commissioned the services of a surrogate mother by the time the kid was delivered, this Japanese couple were divorced, and both the parents, they refused to accept the kid. So this led to the abandonment of Baby Manji and created a major uproar in the Indian public sentiment space. Also, another case of significance in this regard is Baby Dev case. In this case, an Australian couple who already had one kid, and when they wanted one more kid, they realized they were medically infertile to have a kid on their own, and they adopted the surrogacy route. And the surrogate mother who was helping this Australian couple delivered twins. One was a boy and one was a girl. And the Australian couple, since their first kid was a boy, they chose to accept only the girl child and they abandoned the boy kid. So such instances of violation of human rights, violation of basic principles created major uproar in the country. The Indian government, the Indian judiciary was presented with very unique cases with regard to surrogacy. In order to put an end to all of this, the Indian government has come up with the draft surrogacy regulation bill. It has been tabled in the parliament, and right now it is being examined by the Parliamentary Standing Committee. And the Supreme Court has gone one step ahead, and it has provided a window for single men or women to also adopt the surrogacy route by allowing them a representation in front of the Parliamentary Standing Committee. It needs to be seen whether the Parliamentary Standing Committee will accept the demands of single men and women to have children of their own. So the way forward with regard to surrogacy is that the bill has to be implemented in its letter and spirit. It has to put an end to commercial surrogacy, and only altruistic, selfless forms of surrogacy should be allowed. The surrogacy industry has to be better regulated. Our legal mechanisms have to be firmed up to deal with any issues arising out of surrogacy. And also, the bill should be made more progressive by providing a window for single men and women who are unmarried to have kids of their own, and also by allowing gay and lesbian couples to have children. Because some of the progressive countries in the Western world do provide these provisions. So India can set an example by adopting such a progressive route by implementing some of these measures. The next topic for the day is the Maternity Benefit Amendment Bill. A very significant piece of legislation which has been recently passed by the Lok Sabha. It will be very, very important from your examination perspective because it includes a lot of progressive features. So let us try to look at some of the salient features of this amendment bill and also some of the issues related to maternity leave. A very important topic under women empowerment. The Maternity Benefit Amendment Bill was passed by the Lok Sabha last week. It was passed by the Rajya Sabha in 2016 itself. This amendment puts India at the third position in the entire world with regard to providing most maternity leaves. It is only Canada and Norway which are ahead of India with regard to the number of leaves provided to an expecting mother. The amendment has brought about changes in the original act, which is the Maternity Benefit Act of 1961. And the primary mandate of the Maternity Benefit Act is to protect employment of an expecting mother and entitle the women to full paid leave or full paid absence from work. This is provided for in order to help the mother to take care of the kid, to nurture the kid, and also to take care of her own physical and mental well-being. So this was the primary mandate or primary objective of the Maternity Benefit Amendment Bill. And in fact, in 1961, when the Act was passed, the focus of the Act was to help women working in the organized sector to enable them to have access to a full paid absence from work during delivery and post-delivery in order to take care of the child and as well as the mother's own health. So the amendment last week has brought about new provisions. In the original Act, the maternity leave was limited to 12 weeks. 12 weeks of full paid leave was granted to mothers in the working in the organized sector. Right now, this has been increased to 26 weeks, which is a major development, a very progressive piece of legislation, and in fact, India ranks next only to Canada and Norway with regard to maternity benefits right now. The other unique feature of the amendment that was passed by Lok Sabha is that it also provides provision for adoption and as well as surrogacy. Even though if a woman adopts a kid or has a kid through the surrogacy route, the mother is entitled for 12 weeks of leave, full paid leave from work in order to take care of the child. The inclusion of adoption as well as surrogacy will come as a major boon to mothers who are infertile and mothers who are working in the organized sector. The third feature of the amendment is that the provisions are mandatory for any establishment which has more than 50 employees. Any establishment which employs more than 50 people has to mandatorily provide creche facilities in its campus. Creche facilities refers to a dedicated area for mothers to nourish their kids, to take care of their kids, to breastfeed, to change diapers, to also rest. So such creche facilities have to be provided by any establishment which employs more than 50 people. And the provisions of this bill or this amendment will be applicable to all establishments which employ more than 10 people. So any company in the organized sector which employs more than 10 people has to mandatorily implement all the provisions of the amendment. The next salient feature of the amendment is that 26 weeks of paid maternity leave is given only for 2 children. The first 2 children, when they are born, only in that case, only for the first 2 children will the mother be entitled for 26 weeks of paid maternity leave. In case of the third child, the mother can opt for only 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. This is done in order to discourage couples from having more than 2 kids, and this is in line with India's population stabilization policy. The population stabilization policy of India clearly sets a target of total fertility rate, or TFR, of 2.1. We will discuss what TFR means once we finish the amendment bill. So, in keeping in mind the population stabilization policy of India and the target of total fertility rate of 2.1, the amendment bill discourages the couple from having a third child by providing only 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. The mother can opt for 26 weeks of paid leave only for the first 2 kids. Also, apart from the paid maternity leaves, the mother can opt for work from home provision, provided her job profile permits such a arrangement. Work from home can be opted by the mother post her maternity leave. Once a maternity leave of 26 weeks is exhausted, the mother can opt for work from home as well in order to take care of the kids or the children's needs. So these are some of the very progressive features of the maternity benefit amendment bill. Now let's try to analyze the pros and cons of this bill. There has been a lot of criticism that has come in from various commentators. The first criticism with regard to the maternity benefit amendment bill is that it does not recognize paternity leave. It has focused only on maternity leave, and it has excluded the role of the father in the upbringing of the child. The father plays a very significant role in sharing the responsibilities of the mother, and such a discriminatory policy will push the burden of bringing up a child only to the mother. So this discrimination has to be addressed. Right now, the industry standard, especially in the organized sector, is that hardly around 7 days of paternity leave is provided, which is no way sufficient for the father to take care of the mother and as well as the kid. So this discrimination or this lacuna needs to be addressed. The second criticism is that the bill completely ignores the unorganized sector. The provisions of this bill is applicable only to the organized sector. The unorganized sector, which employs 90% of India's women, is completely left out from the ambit of the maternity benefit amendment bill. So this is a major drawback. In fact, in 2015, the Law Commission of India had recommended the inclusion of unorganized sector as well, especially women working as domestic workers, women working as agricultural laborers, and women working as construction laborers. Because this segment of the population are not only economically downtrodden, but are also devoid of access to basic healthcare and nutritional facilities. since the bill completely ignores the unorganized sector, it becomes a major drawback because 90% of Indian women are employed in the unorganized sector. The recommendations of the Law Commission have not been included. So this is something that the Government of India needs to address in the further amendments that might be carried out to the Maternity Benefit Act. But that doesn't mean the unorganized sector is completely ignored from the purview of the Government of India. Expectant mothers who are employed in the unorganized sector are currently covered under various schemes. So let us try to look at some of the schemes and some of the labor laws which provide for maternity benefits, because this comparison is very critical for both prelims and mains, because the maternity amendment bill is in news, but that doesn't mean other acts and laws which provide maternity benefit in the unorganized sector are not relevant for this year's exam. In fact, since most of the focus will be on the maternity benefit amendment bill, which caters only to the organized sector, the chances are very high that UPSC might link this development to maternity benefits in the unorganized sector. There might be a prelims question as well as a mains question. So the first scheme or provision which takes care of maternity benefits in the unorganized sector is through the Indira Gandhi Matritva Sahayog Yojana, a very popular scheme which caters to the expectant mothers in the unorganized sector. It is a cash transfer scheme. Kindly note down these details because in prelims, questions can be very, very specific. If there is a question on Indira Gandhi Matritva Sahayog Yojana, you should be very clear with regard to the salient features of this scheme. The first feature is that it provides maternity benefits to the unorganized sector. Second, it is a cash transfer scheme. It provides for 6,000 rupees to be transferred to the mother for the birth of 2 children. So the first 2 children born to a woman working in the unorganized sector, the Government of India will transfer 6,000 rupees per kid. For each kid, an amount of 6,000 rupees is provided to the mother, and the primary purpose of providing such a cash transfer is to compensate for the loss of income, because women working in the unorganized sector depend on daily wages to meet their livelihood needs. They not only take care of their own physical self, but also they cater to the entire family's livelihood needs. So when a woman working in the unorganized sector becomes a mother, it becomes very difficult for her to meet her nutritional requirements and other livelihood expenses. And also, if she stops going to work, there will be a significant loss of income for the family. So in order to compensate for this loss, the Government of India provides 6,000 rupees for 2 kids, the first 2 kids that are born under the Indira Gandhi Matritva Sahayog Yojana. There are a variety of labor laws in India which provide maternity benefits for the unorganized sector. Let's have a brief look at some of the labor laws. The first one is the ESI Act. The second one is the Working Journalists Act. And also, there is one more legal provision which caters to the maternity benefit needs of the unorganized sector. It is the Unorganized Sector Workers Act. So these three legal provisions constitute the various labor laws which provide maternity benefits to women working in the unorganized sector. So kindly make a note of these provisions, these four provisions which cater to the needs of the unorganized sector. Now let us look at the primary purpose or the primary objective of having such a scheme. The first objective is to help India achieve its IMR, MMR and TFR targets. These three are very important social indicators, health indicators. IMR stands for infant mortality rate, MMR stands for maternal mortality rate, and TFR stands for total fertility rate. So the Maternity Benefit Amendment Bill will help India improve its IMR, MMR and TFR scores. Currently, India lags behind in all these development indicators. India performs very poorly with regard to IMR and MMR health indicators when compared at a global level. In fact, in 2014, the United Nations came up with the Millennium Development Goals report or the MDG report. According to this report, India recorded the highest maternal deaths in the world. In fact, India's performance on IMR and MMR indicators sometimes has been even worse than some of the sub-Saharan African countries. Even though India has achieved significant progress in improving its IMR and MMR numbers, still India is seen to be lagging behind when compared with other developing and underdeveloped countries. So according to the UN MDG report, India recorded the highest maternal deaths, and as per recent figures given out by the Niti Aayog, currently India's infant mortality rate stands at 40 deaths per 1,000 live births. These indicators are very significant from your prelims perspective. It's not sufficient that you know only what IMR means, but you also need to know the exact measure of IMR. Infant mortality is measured against 1,000 live births. The number of infant mortalities that occur per 1,000 live births is what gives the IMR rate. And currently, India registers around 40 deaths per 1,000 live births. Similarly, maternal mortality rate is measured per 1 lakh live births, and India registers around 167 deaths per 1 lakh live births. The MMR figures were applicable as of 2011 to 2013. These are the figures given out by Niti Aayog. So it can be seen that India's performance on the IMR front and as well as the MMR front is pretty dismal. So the Maternal Benefit Amendment Bill holds a lot of promise in helping India improve its IMR and MMR rates. The third indicator that we were discussing earlier is the TFR, or the total fertility rate. Total fertility rate is defined as the average number of children who would be born per woman. The average number of children a woman can have is what constitutes the total fertility rate. Currently, in India, TFR stands at around 2.4, which means that every fertile woman is having around 2.4 children on an average. It's an average. That's the reason you get not a whole number, but instead you have an average that is 2.4. When compared to a global level, this rate or this average is pretty high. And in fact, it is this which is pushing India's population to go beyond manageable numbers. In order to stabilize its population, India has come up with something called as population stabilization policy. Under this policy, India has set a TFR target of 2.1. It basically means India plans to reduce the average number of children that each woman is having to around 2 kids per woman. So currently it is 2.4, and when compared to global standards, this is still significantly high. So in the coming decades, India plans to bring down its TFR to 2.1. And if India manages to achieve a TFR of 2.1, this will help India stabilize its population growth. So that will roughly equate the number of births with the number of deaths, and that will help India stabilize its population growth in the future. Also, when talking about TFR, it is very essential to have a state-wise analysis, because this can be very important from your prelims perspective as well as in mains, because there is a lot of discrepancies or there's a lot of divide that exists when you look at TFR rates amongst different states. In fact, the TFR rate can be a indicator of socio-economic development in a particular state. Let's take an example. States like Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, which are largely well developed compared to other underdeveloped states, have a very low TFR. The total fertility rate of these better performing states is around 1.7. Whereas states like Bihar, which is largely underdeveloped, its socio-economic performance is very dismal, has the highest TFR ratio in the whole of India. It's around 3.6, which means on an average, each Bihari woman is having around 3.6 kids. So this clearly goes on to show the large divide that exists with regard to socio-economic development in Indian states. It clearly reflects that in Tamil Nadu and in West Bengal, there is much better economic opportunities, which in turn reduces the need to have more kids. And also in Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, the governments have managed to implement much better family planning schemes. Only a well-developed state will be able to implement such family planning measures. There is better adoption of contraception. As a result of these socio-economic programs, states such as Tamil Nadu and Bihar have managed to achieve a very low TFR of around 1.7. On the other hand, a state like Bihar, which constantly underperforms when it comes to socio-economic indicators, has very poorly implemented family planning schemes. Persistent poverty and lack of economic opportunities drives the need for couples to have more children. So poverty in fact forms a vicious circle which triggers population explosion. The need to have more working hands in order to meet the livelihood needs of a poor family drives the need for these couples to have more kids, and finally the inability of the family to meet the basic needs of those kids will drive the family further into poverty. So this forms a vicious circle, and hence it can be said that TFR is a very good indicator of socio-economic development. It will also help in achieving population stabilization targets. So with this, we complete 4 very important topics from the last week. Now let's take up 2 topics from environment and biodiversity conservation. There are 2 very important developments. One is with regard to tiger reserves. In fact, in prelims, questions related to biodiversity conservation, environment, ecology are going up. If you do a basic analysis of previous question papers, around 20 to 25 questions will be related to biodiversity and environment conservation. So under this, tiger reserves is a very important topic. The news last week was that Uttarakhand, a Himalayan state, is likely to get 2 more tiger reserves. It's very important to know the names of these tiger reserves and where they are located, because the question in prelims generally will be in the match the following format, where on the left you will have various names of tiger reserves, on the right you will have states, and you'll be asked to match the location of the tiger reserve with its respective state. So in Uttarakhand, 2 more tiger reserves are proposed to be set up. One is the Nandar Wildlife Sanctuary, and the second is the Surai Range. This is in addition to the already existing tiger reserves in Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand already has 2 tiger reserves. One is the Corbett Tiger Reserve. The second is the Rajaji Tiger Reserve. So these are the 2 existing tiger reserves in Uttarakhand, and these are the 2 newly proposed tiger reserves. So this brings the total number of tiger reserves in Uttarakhand to 4. And in fact, this makes Uttarakhand the first state in North India to get 4 tiger reserves. The states with the highest number of tiger reserves are Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. They have 6 tiger reserves each. Second in this list is Karnataka, which has 5 tiger reserves. If there is a question with regard to which state has the highest number of tiger reserves, the answer would be Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra at the first position, and Karnataka has the second highest number of tiger reserves. So in North India, Uttarakhand will soon become the state with the highest number of tiger reserves, that is 4. One more significant fact with regard to tiger conservation is with regard to which state has the maximum number of tigers. In this ranking, Karnataka takes the first place. The 5 tiger reserves in Karnataka, prominently Bandipur, Nagarhole, Anshi, and other tiger reserves, house around 406 tigers, which is a very significant number. And in fact, Uttarakhand ranks second with regard to the number of tigers. Uttarakhand has around 340 tigers. So Karnataka and Uttarakhand are performing really well when it comes to tiger conservation. Now let's link this topic with other areas of the examination. It is very essential for you to understand as to what governs the administration of tiger reserves in India. You also need to know how many tiger reserves are there. You need to know the names of the few prominent tiger reserves and in which states they are located. So in India, there are around 50 tiger reserves as of now, and the administration of tiger reserves is governed by Project Tiger. Project Tiger was a very important tiger conservation program which was launched in 1973 by the government of India. When India realized that it was drastically losing its tiger population to poaching and other anthropogenic factors, India launched Project Tiger. In fact, under this policy, the tiger reserves are delineated and they are governed and administered under the policies laid down under Project Tiger. The authority which oversees the implementation of Project Tiger is called as the NTCA, or the National Tiger Conservation Authority. It is the NTCA which implements the policies under Project Tiger. It administers and governs the tiger reserves that are demarked in India. The other significant feature with regard to tiger conservation in India is that India is home to around 70% of the entire tiger population in the world. %70% of the world's tigers are present in India. So that clearly makes India a very significant player in the field of tiger conservation. Let's look at a few numbers because this will be helpful in both prelims as well as in mains. In 2006, when a tiger census was conducted by NTCA, only 1,411 tigers were counted. This alarming number triggered panic in India's conservation efforts. Both the Indian government as well as conservation enthusiasts were extremely alarmed by the dwindling population of tigers in India. So immediately the government of India, in coordination with various NGOs and other conservation groups, launched a revitalized Project Tiger to improve the habitat of these tigers, to improve the numbers of these tigers, and as a result, we have managed to achieve a very significant success. For example, in 2011, when a tiger census was conducted again, the tiger population had increased to 1,706. In 2014, the numbers recorded were 2,226. This was a significant improvement in India's tiger population. And recently, in 2016, the tiger census has revealed that India is home to around 2,500 tigers. So India has managed to almost double the number of tigers present in India in a span of 10 years. And these numbers are given out by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, MOEF. So this statistic clearly presents how successful Project Tiger has been, and the initiatives taken by Government of India in collaboration with conservation groups has managed to achieve this major success. Coming to the second topic under environment and biodiversity conservation, there was a recent report known as the Asian Waterbird Census. The Asian Waterbird Census is conducted by an international NGO called as Wetlands International. Wetlands International, in collaboration with the Punjab Forest Department, carried out a waterbird census survey in Roper wetland. Roper is a very significant wetland located in Punjab, and the Wetlands International NGO, in collaboration with the Punjab Forest Department, has conducted the Asian Waterbird Census. According to this census, it has been noted that very few migratory waterbirds have been sighted at Roper. Generally, Roper used to get migratory waterbirds from as far as Central Asia, Siberia, etc. Waterbirds used to fly thousands of kilometers. They used to migrate to Roper wetland and thereby enriching the biodiversity of the wetland. It has been noted in this census that unfortunately few migratory birds have actually migrated from these regions, and this is a matter of great concern. And the international group has outlined the factors behind this drastic change, and it's been largely attributed to anthropogenic factors or human-induced factors. Some of them are scarcity of food, because human activity in the region would have destroyed the ecosystem. It would have reduced the availability of food resources for these migratory birds. So the scarcity of food has resulted in fewer birds in migrating from Central Asia and Siberia to the Roper wetland. The second anthropogenic factor is the exploitative fishing and other human disturbances in the wetland. Roper wetland is a very important fishing ground for the local community, and exploitative fishing in the region and other human disturbances in the form of recreational activities has had a direct impact on the biodiversity and the ecosystem in Roper wetland. And the third factor is global warming or climate change. This has resulted in the drying up of wetlands. It has reduced the overall area of the wetland and has thus negatively impacted the ecosystem of these waterbirds. So these are some alarming factors. So having a basic understanding of the human-induced elements behind destruction of ecosystems will be very important for both your prelims as well as your mains. In the same census, a few popular birds have been spotted. It might be important for you to know some of these names. The first one is known as Oriental Darter. And the second bird which has been spotted is River Papwing. These two are important because both these migratory waterbirds are listed in the Red Book of IUCN as endangered. UPSC has asked such questions based on various endangered and vulnerable species which have been listed in the Red Book of IUCN. So Oriental Darter and River Papwing have been spotted at Roper wetland, and both these migratory waterbirds are categorized as endangered in the Red Book or the Red List of IUCN. Now let us briefly understand what a wetland means and what are the international conventions which deal with conservation of wetlands. Roper wetland is a man-made freshwater riverine wetland. It's important to know the defining features of prominent biodiversity or ecosystem areas which are reported in news. The first thing about Roper wetland is it's located in Punjab. Second, it is man-made. It is a freshwater riverine wetland. Along with these two endangered birds, Roper wetland also houses the very unique Indian narrow-headed soft-shelled turtle. It's a very unique turtle which has a very small head, a narrow head, and the shell of this turtle is very soft, unlike the hard-shelled turtles we generally see. So this unique turtles are endemic and are largely limited to the Roper wetland in Punjab. So these three species are prominently present in Roper. It might be very difficult to remember the names of so many vulnerable or endangered animals. The best way to remember is whenever you come across these names, make a note of it and also look up these animals and birds on the internet. Because once you look at the image, once you look at a picture of these turtles or these birds, it becomes all the more easier for you to remember and recollect during your examination. Now moving on to conservation of wetlands. There is a very popular convention known as the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. Ramsar is a city located in Iran where the convention was negotiated. It was signed in 1971. This convention focuses on conservation of wetlands across the world and its sustainable use. Because sustainable development is the key theme of the development agenda of the United Nations, which has come up with Agenda 2030, which is the post-development agenda after the Millennium Development Goals. So, Ramsar Convention is in line with the Sustainable Development Agenda proposed by the United Nations, that is Agenda 2030. It focuses on conservation of wetlands and their sustainable usage. According to the Ramsar Convention, around 2,231 wetlands have been designated as Ramsar sites. So once a wetland is designated as a Ramsar site, it mandates the host country to invest in conservation efforts of that particular wetland. Because the Ramsar Convention is an international obligation, and it also enables countries to learn from the best experiences of each other. The best methods of conservation, the knowledge, the technology can be transferred, and the Ramsar Convention serves as a platform to enable such conservation efforts. For your exams, it is important to know how many Ramsar sites are located in India. There are 26 Ramsar sites in India. You need not remember the names of all the 26 sites. It is advisable that you know some of the prominent ones and in which states they are located. For example, you have the Ular Lake in Jammu and Kashmir. Then you have the Koleru Lake in Andhra Pradesh. You have the Chilika Lake in Odisha. You have Loktak in Manipur. Then you have Vembanad in Kerala. So these are some of the prominent wetlands which are designated as Ramsar sites. All you need to know is, remember these wetlands, only the few prominent ones which are frequently in use, and try to remember in which states they are located. And if there is some unique feature associated to that particular wetland, try to remember that as well. Because with regard to Roper, we saw that it's a man-made freshwater riverine wetland. It's a unique feature. Similarly, Chilika Lake is the largest brackish water lake in India. So, if there are such unique defining features, try to remember that as well. I would like to give out two significant facts with regard to Ramsar sites, which might help you in your prelims. The United Kingdom has the highest number of Ramsar sites in the world. It has around 170 wetlands classified as Ramsar sites. So United Kingdom holds this distinction of having the highest number of Ramsar sites. And Bolivia, a Latin American country, holds the record for having the greatest area of listed wetlands. Bolivia has the greatest area of wetlands which are designated as Ramsar sites. So try and remember these two facts. It might be helpful in your prelims. Now coming to the last part of wetland conservation. Initially we saw that it was an NGO known as Wetlands International, which had carried out the global survey as well as the Asian Waterbird survey. So you need to know some basic features about such international organizations. In the initial part of the session, we learned about Transparency International, Similarly, Wetlands International is a global NGO. It's a not-for-profit organization. It's a non-governmental organization. It is headquartered in a city called as Ede in the country of Netherlands. Its primary mandate is to work towards sustaining and restoring wetlands across the world. This is the primary objective of this NGO known as Wetlands International. It works towards sustaining and restoring wetlands across the world. In order to achieve this objective, it carries out two very prominent surveys across the world. One is the Asian Waterbird Census, which we saw with regard to the Roper wetland. The second survey is the International Waterbird Census. These two are very important reports that are brought out by Wetlands International. The reason why this becomes significant for your prelims is that International Waterbird Census is celebrating its 50th anniversary. The International Waterbird Census was commissioned in the year 1967 by Wetlands International. Due to this anniversary celebration, International Waterbird Census might be important, and also the Asian Waterbird Census has come up with very significant report with regard to Roper wetland. As a result, these two might be significant because UPSC tends to ask questions on organizations or groupings which are celebrating its 25th or 50th anniversaries. So with this, we have covered almost all the important developments in the last 1 week in the field of current affairs. Just to end the session, I will list out a couple of topics which unfortunately could not be covered due to paucity of time. I would suggest kindly go through these topics, and also I have given detailed notes in the handouts. The first topic is with regard to UNSC reforms, because India clearly came out with its stance with regard to UNSC reforms. There was a lot of controversy which said that India was looking to change its traditional position with regard to UNSC reforms, especially with regard to the veto power of permanent members. So this was in news. The G4 grouping, which constitutes 4 countries, namely India, Brazil, Germany, and Japan. These 4 countries have formed the G4 grouping, which is pushing for reforms in the United Nations and at the United Nations Security Council. Your preparation would have already made you aware that the UNSC is a very important UN organ which deliberates on various security related issues which are arising across the world. And there are 2 categories of members at the UNSC. One, you have the permanent members. Second, you have the non-permanent members. The permanent members, or the P5 countries, that is US, Russia, China, Britain and France, enjoy the veto power. Even one country's veto, one permanent member's veto is sufficient to derail an entire resolution at the UNSC. So that is the significance of veto power. And then you have 10 non-permanent members who are elected on a rotational basis for a 2-year term. This is the existing setup, and it is this setup that the G4 countries are looking to change. Because United Nations was set up in 1945 in the backdrop of 2 world wars, and the structure and functioning of UN is reflective of the World War era days. It doesn't reflect the present geopolitical realities. So this is the main point of contention for developing countries like India, Brazil, Germany and Japan. And these countries are pushing for democratic reforms at the United Nations. So the main demand is to increase the membership in the permanent category as well as in the non-permanent category. I'll briefly outline the position of G4 countries with regard to UNSC reforms, because this will be very important throughout your examination. The first demand of G4 countries is that the UN should reflect current geopolitical realities. Right now, these countries feel that the UN has a very outdated structure. It doesn't give representation for significant players like members of the G4. And the G4 is insisting on having text-based negotiations with regard to the UN reforms. Until recently, United Nations was merely giving lip service to the topic of UN reforms. It was only verbal negotiations that were being carried out. The P5 countries were not agreeing for a concrete text-based negotiation. So the G4 countries have pushed very firmly for implementing text-based negotiations. And in fact, this has been accepted in principle by the permanent members. The very important development with regard to veto power was that the G4 countries have agreed for a self-moratorium on the use of veto power for a period of 15 years. The agreement is that if UNSC reforms are carried out and if permanent members are accepted, especially all the G4 countries, if they are accepted into the permanent grouping, the G4 members are willing to give up the right to veto power for a period of 15 years. They will be imposing a moratorium on the usage of veto power for a period of 15 years. So this seems to be a fair deal in order to initiate reforms at one of the most significant international organizations. And finally, the G4 group is pushing for a review process at the end of 15 years. Let's say if the reforms are carried out in the coming General Assembly and permanent membership is increased by accepting the G4 countries. The G4 countries will give up their veto right for 15 years, provided there is a review process with regard to reforms. For the review process to happen, there has to be a clear deadline or a timeline which has to be firmed up. So this is one of the conditions put out by the G4 countries, that after 15 years, there will be a review process which will review the right to use veto power. So India has said that there has been no change in its official stance with regard to UNSC reforms, that India is willing to impose a moratorium on the right to veto for 15 years, provided there is expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories at the UNSC. So this was a very important development with regard to international relations. In the same topic, there are two more developments which are pretty important. I'll just highlight and we'll discuss in brief. One was the India-Sri Lanka fishermen dispute. This has been a long ranging dispute between both the neighbors. In the Park Bay, fishermen of both the countries tend to cross over the international maritime boundary line and has resulted in a lot of tension between both the countries. Especially during the heights of the ethnic conflict, Indian fishermen especially used to cross over into the Sri Lankan waters when they were looking out for better fishing resources, and they used to be apprehended by the Sri Lankan Coast Guard or the Sri Lankan Navy. And there have also been instances where fishermen on either side have been killed by their respective coast guards and their navies. And also the terror groups which are operating, the Tamil Elam groups, also used to target these fishermen who used to cross the international maritime boundary line. So this has frequently led to tensions between both the countries, especially considering how emotive the issue of fishermen is for the state of Tamil Nadu. So recently, just last week, an Indian fisherman who accidentally crossed over into the Sri Lankan water was shot down and was killed by an unknown group. It's not known whether it was the Sri Lankan Coast Guard or the Navy or some non-state actors. So this has again given rise to tensions in India-Sri Lanka relationship. So in order to resolve this persisting conflict, both countries had actually agreed upon setting up a joint working group. They had also agreed to set up a hotline between the coast guards of both the countries. So these were the two remedy measures that was agreed upon, but unfortunately it largely remains unfulfilled till date. These were unfulfilled promises. The hope is that both countries implement the agreed promises with regard to setting up of a joint working group and establishing a hotline in order to prevent misunderstanding between both the coast guards, both the navies, and as well as fishermen from both the countries. Under the same issue, it's very essential to understand one very important topic known as bottom trawling. Bottom trawling is a technique of using mechanized boats to carry out large-scale fishing activities. Fishing resources are usually located at the middle depths of a water body and also at great depths of the particular water body. It's commercially and economically viable to engage in normal, non-mechanized fishing when there is enough fishing resources present at the top layers of the water. Once these resources which are present at the topper layers are exhausted, fishermen resort to something known as mechanized fishing. Under this technique, bottom trawlers are employed, where these mechanized fishing boats drop their nets to the bottom of the seabed and they trawl the fishing resources from the bottom of the seabed. So this will exhaust the very ecosystem that supports fisheries. So since Indian fishermen are better equipped, they have resorted to large-scale mechanized fishing via bottom trawling, and this is a major area of concern for the Sri Lankan government and as well as the Sri Lankan fishermen. And since the Indian side of the maritime boundary has been depleted of its fishery resources, the Indian fishermen tend to cross over to the Sri Lankan side and has resulted in a diplomatic standoff very frequently. So both the countries have to work on a mechanism to resolve this dispute by setting up a joint working group and setting up a hotline in order to reduce misunderstandings and tensions in the region. And the final topic with regard to international relations is with reference to the Hambantota port. Hambantota port is strategically located in the south of Sri Lanka. It is a deep sea port, in fact, which was offered by the Sri Lankan government to India to develop naval facilities, naval and commercial facilities at Hambantota. But the Indian government at that point found the project to be unviable and did not respond to Sri Lankan demands. So this port project was handed over to China by the Mahinda Rajapaksa government, which was very friendly to the Chinese government. That's when India became very alarmed, and India perceived the Hambantota port to be a part of the string of pearls theory. The string of pearls is a geopolitical theory which theorizes that Sri Lanka is one of the pearls amongst the string that China is trying to weave in order to encircle India. It is believed that China is investing in naval and commercial facilities in the Indian Ocean region, ranging from the Straits of Malacca near Singapore to the Straits of Hormuz in the Gulf. So it is this strategic area that India considers to be its primary sphere of influence. And in order to counter Indian influence in the region, it is believed that China has adopted this policy of string of pearls to develop strategic naval and commercial facilities in the region spanning between Straits of Malacca and the Straits of Hormuz. It can be seen that China has proactively invested in many other ports in the region. It could be the Gwadar port in Pakistan. It could be the Chittagong or Mongla port in Bangladesh. It could be the Sitwe port in Myanmar. And in Sri Lanka, it is the Hambantota port. And similarly, in East Africa, China has made significant inroads, especially in countries like Djibouti, Eritrea, etc. In such East African coastal countries, China has been able to get access to set up naval and commercial facilities to dominate the sea lanes of communication between the strategic choke point area that is located between Straits of Malacca and the Straits of Hormuz. So the recent development was that Sri Lanka has realized that the Hambantota port was in fact economically unviable. Though the project was handed over to a Chinese company which developed military and commercial facilities at Hambantota, the Sri Lankan government has come to the realization that the project is not economically feasible in the long run. So right now the Sri Lankan government is trying to scale back the project. It is trying to sell off the stakes in the project. Especially the new government in Sri Lanka, which took power in 2015, post Mahinda Rajapaksa, has been well disposed towards India, and even the Sri Lankan government has realized the economic unviability of the Hambantota project. So the Sri Lankan government is trying to scale back this project, and this might deal a severe blow to the string of pearls strategy of China. That's the reason why this recent development becomes significant. So with this, we have covered all the important topics, all the important developments that have occurred in the last 1 week. All these developments will be very important from both a prelims perspective and as well as a mains perspective. So kindly make notes, kindly follow up and try to recollect on what we have discussed. And if you have any questions or any doubts, kindly write to us. Also, you can drop in your comments and I'll try to answer your questions. Kindly take down the email ID wherein you can drop your questions. It's targetias@byju's.com. So thank you guys for joining this session. It's been a pleasure discussing the recent developments. Hope to catch you soon. And any doubts, kindly let us know. Thank you.